You joined us for Rain of Blood, and together we made it rain bigger and better than we could have ever imagined. So now, join us for a second blazing inferno of knowledge and exploration. You're listening to Rain of Fire, the scorching sequel event to Rain of Blood, where we're going to delve into the world of fire play education and safety as we prepare for the upcoming Rain of Fire event. Join your host, Miss Kitten, Radically Dark, and Ember Solaris as we ignite your curiosity and stoke the flames of passion with discussions, interviews, and authentic insights from around the globe. Together, we're three flames united in one mission to make quality kink education more accessible and open pathways to conversation and connection about edgeplay topics around the world. But before we dive into these sizzling topics, a content warning. Rain of Fire discusses mature themes, explicit content, and practices related to BDSM and fireplay. So listener discretion is advised, and this is an adult-only podcast. Other topics may include mental health, trauma, consent, and more. So please be sure you're in a good spot to engage in these topics before continuing to listen. So, grab your fire gear, stoke the flames of curiosity, and let's embark on this crackling journey together. Welcome to Rain of Fire.
Hey, my amazing firebugs, and welcome back to our Rain of Fire podcast. You're chatting with Miss K in the dungeon from Cape Town. Really excited to be speaking to Ginger Wolf all the way across the sea about fire and fire eating. So welcome to the space, and thank you so much for A, coming on to Rain of Fire with us, and B, coming onto my podcast and chatting to this kitten about how to make things burn.
Thank you so much for having me, Miss Kitten. It is lovely to be here with you.
I'm super excited, Joe. You do some really crazy fire things. But before I ask you too much about the fire things, I want to know a little bit about how you became non-vanilla. What touched your heart and made it dark, and how did you leave the Muggle world?
Well, that kind of actually ironically goes back to what I refer to as my first official girlfriend, or as what most people would probably call my first sexually active relationship. And it just started where I kind of off the cuff was just like, if you keep that up, I'm going to give you a spanking. And she tried to call my bluff, which didn't work out too well for her. And we both discovered we both like spanking. I like spanking people. She liked getting spanked. And from there, it was more or less off to the races. But this was before technology is where it is and information is where it is now. So it was a slow journey at the beginning, for sure, because a lot of times when you would, even now, to be fair, if you would look up anything regarding kink, it was pretty much all pornography.
Yeah, and only available to some, because countries like mine, it wasn't available at all.
Yeah, exactly.
So, the internet certainly has changed things. I was quite amazed at the youth in kink and how vast their knowledge is and how they've educated themselves so incredibly. It was really impressive to see these youngsters and to hear these youngsters talk, because they've actually done their homework. Yeah, I think I'm just getting old. I expect kids not to do their homework, so I was a bit surprised. But definitely different from when we were growing up. There was no access to any of that.
Oh yeah, like I say, at that time. Yeah, because I'm from Canada, just so that everybody knows where we're talking from and everything. But for us, it was still dial-up modems and stuff like that. So what information was available online was pretty hard to come by.
Like, you can still remember the sound of that modem connecting.
Oh yeah.
I'm really giving my age away now, but if you
I,
see pictures of me, I don't look that old, but I am that old. Like just before the ship landed in South Africa, I was born. No, I'm kidding. Um, yeah. So kink became part of your life, and we all love a good spanking. So I can understand how you found that captivating. It's definitely something that this kitten enjoys a lot. Um, and how did you get into fire? How did fire become part of your journey?
so I don't want to give away any names because I like to try to keep people's privacy, especially when they haven't consented to me giving their names. But a partner of mine, um, who was very well versed in, and I at the time I was very not well versed in the world of kink. She built flogger. She still builds floggers, paddles, stuff like that. But she was also on the fringe of fire play, and she had a friend who was pretty well versed in fire play. So between the two of them, they kind of taught me how to do fire play.
I love
So
that. I love how our experiences with other people rub off us on us in the most alarming ways. And
absolutely.
leave a legacy. That's a
Mm,
very cool legacy to leave with somebody, isn't it? A whole lifetime of
absolutely.
fire. And
Yeah.
you've taken the fire quite far because it's not just part of your kink life, it's part of your act or part of your performance. Am I correct?
Absolutely. So I do stand-up comedy and magic, although I do lean a little further into the comedy aspect of that because most people think of stand-up comedy and magic as like Penn and Teller or The Amazing Jonathan. Um, I'm far more into the comedy side, but when I do magic, I like to do things that are a little bit more extreme, a little what most people would refer to as like sideshow or freak show style things. And part of that is because I'm a bigger guy. I'm 6'2", about 250 pounds. So when you do typical magic things, it doesn't look quite as elegant as when you see a smaller person doing it. So I decided to lean towards more bigger and bolder type things. And of course, fire eating leads very well into that.
I'm captivated by the world of fire eating. It's fire in small doses is still much bigger than me and terrifying. I'm not gonna dismiss the fire eating because I will say that I have been holding water in my mouth to practice in case future me ever wants to do it. Like it's good to know that I can do it or not do it. So it's definitely something that piqued my interest. So can you tell me a bit? You don't have to. I don't expect you to tell me how you do it, but can you tell me a bit more about it and yeah, and what it feels like
Well,
and what it feels like to do?
well, interestingly, when I first started, especially when it comes to your mouth, because your mouth, of course, is a quite sensitive piece of hardware. Anybody who's bitten their tongue and that kind of thing, that hurts quite a bit. But the other interesting side is your mouth heals quite fast because you have a higher amount of white blood cells in your mouth usually, which is why it's kind of partially instinctual. If you like nick your finger or something, you want to suck on your finger because you're ideally putting more white blood cells into that area. I'm not sure if you are, but I've heard some people say you are, and I've heard some people say you aren't. So I'm going to leave that one a little bit ambiguous. But the first thing you kind of have to learn is how to control your breathing. And the first thing that I actually learned on was just matches, just regular wooden matches, which is funny because you kind of breathe backwards when you actually start getting to the actual fire eating. But it's just getting used to the fire around your mouth and getting it used to touching your tongue and stuff like that, and learning how to notice the amount of moisture that is in your mouth as well. Because, of course, you want an adequate amount of more moisture in your mouth. You definitely don't want dry mouth when you're trying to eat fire. Even though the whole concept of fire eating is essentially using air to you put your mouth around the fire so that it extinguishes it because you're cutting off its air supply.
Okay, wait. I have a million questions. You've got my
Okay.
brain. You've got my brain firing. So the first thing you said is you feel the fire on your tongue. That
Yes.
sounds so amazing. Tell me what that feels like.
It's more of a taste than anything. Because you get with matches and stuff like that, obviously you want to burn off the sulfur because sulfur is not good for you before you ever touch it to your tongue. And you get the charcoaly taste to your tongue, and it's definitely not pleasant. Now I'm used to it, so it's one of those, it doesn't bother me. But when you first start doing it, once you kind of get past the fear factor, it's more of the charcoaly taste to it because the fire goes out so quickly, ideally anyway, that you don't really notice much of the taste of the fire itself.
And what happens if the fire doesn't go out quickly?
Then you have to be able to have good reflexes to know when something's going on. That was actually the next thing I was going to say, is that a lot of people talk about how, because I also work as a cook, that's my full-time job. You kind of get desensitized to the fire, which to an extent is right, but you also develop a hypersensitivity to it, because if you're feeling too much temperature at different points, then you know something's wrong and you know when to back off.
Okay, that's clever. And I think there is, like, your senses do become used to the medium that you're working with. My senses can now pick up different sounds of fire. This is going to sound very bad, but anyway, they can pick up different sounds of fire. Like fire, as a complete newbie to fire, fire has some really incredible sounds. Like the sound of lighting the fuel is fucking amazing. That's like bucket list. That is like orgasmic. That whoosh is just, it's still lots of adrenaline, lots of thrills for me. But the other sounds that you pick up immediately, like the sound of burning hair, that is like, I didn't pick it up the first couple of times. Now I can hear the first hair sizzle over a busy road.
Yeah. I refer to that as the hair frizz, because it doesn't quite sizzle like wood does. It's more of a kind of sound.
You've got it. That's definitely it. And I know then that, like, my reflexes now know then that they need to respond immediately. Like, it's not even like think about it, it's just do it.
Yes.
I think your timing with fire, it's the first kink. I mean, there are a lot of kinks that require good timing. It takes, you got to have good timing to be a good flogger. You've got to, impact requires reasonable timing. My kink is sharps. Which is fabulous. You don't need any good timing. You can have a snack in between. You can phone a friend. You can put your feet up. You can, you can have a little break, and the scene still continues. But fire is not like that. Fire, you literally are working in seconds, and your brain's got to compute all the stuff. So I think what you were saying about you get accustomed, I think, to how fire is as a creature, and then you are able to understand when it's not behaving like it's not responding to you like it should be responding to you.
Yes, absolutely. And the interesting thing is doing it on stage, you kind of have to learn really quickly what to examine first, second, third kind of thing. Which also really helps with kink, because that means that I can transition, my partner doesn't know I'm sensing something is off. So I'm doing a quick check while they're still in the mood and in the moment, just to be like, okay, is it the fluid that's the problem? Is it the fire stick itself that's the problem? Which is the issue here?
Yeah, and so you just touched on another subject that I think is really important with fire as well, is that it's an immediate reaction. So you at the top are reacting immediately to a change in the medium that you are not enjoying or that's not resonating with you. You're not leaving it and letting it stand. The same way the bottom needs to be able to resonate, to say this is not working for me, and use their voice and respond. So the responses in fire just seem so much more important than in any normal kink.
Absolutely. And what I usually, when I play with somebody for the first time with fire, I'll do it on their back first, and that's partly because that way they can't see it, they just get the sensation and the feeling. And then that way they get more of a comfort level with the fire itself before I start doing it on their front.
Yeah, because you never know how you're going to react when that fire comes towards you. It's quite a self-awareness exercise. It terrified me. I'm not going to lie. I'm getting better at it. I also have gone from having quite big ones to really, 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 really small baby ones until I get used to the idea, and I'm more capable of managing my small amount of fire.
Yeah. Well, and that's also one thing that I recommend for most people, at least starting off, although I still continue to do this, make your own fire wands instead of trying to purchase them, because usually you're only going to find the ones that are designed for fire eating, which are quite big. And if you make your own, you can kind of control the size that you want for it and what you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and that comfortable is important because when you're not used to working with the medium and you get into a situation where you need to respond, in the beginning, it takes you a while to do that. I'll tell you, I have no hair left on my arms because I didn't respond fast enough. I know all about burning hair from my own experience. But it with a smaller wand, there wasn't as much panic in the situation because I didn't have quite as much to control.
Exactly.
So I ticked that box with a big tick because that for me was a huge thing. The first day we had quite a gigantic wand, and as I lit it, the whoosh was amazing, but it was terrifying. And then I went to put it out and I didn't smother it properly. And the fire ran up the wand and up my arm. I mean, I was in no danger. There was a second, there was a sputter, but even just learning how to light it and put it out took me a while. Like, it wasn't something that was automatic. I must sound like a really bad fire player.
Not at all. Like I say, for me, I record my sets when I do stand up, even if it's just because I'm trying something new and I want to see how it works out and stuff like that. So I have a lot of footage of me eating fire, and I can see, I'll see little mistakes that I make, like, oh, I shouldn't have gestured that way while I had a lit wand or stuff like that. So even somebody who has a lot of experience can still make little mistakes, and I can catch the little mistakes that I make in hindsight, but it's usually not during it where I'm like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. And usually it's just very little things so one thing I always do is I'll have what I refer to as my clean hand, which doesn't touch any fluid whatsoever, regardless of what's happening. And then that way I can use it very quickly to smother anything if it's just a little issue. I also keep a damp towel on hand just as a bigger smothering thing. And of course, a fire extinguisher and water just to make super sure.
Yeah, those are things that I have become very accustomed to setting up.
Yeah, I refer to it as fire moves fast. So the more safety you have in place, the better you are.
I love that. That's I think it's something that you always have to have respect for. But I also like it's been interesting because it's just sort of distinguished. It's really redefined personal responsibility in kink for me. It's not something that you can not have capacity for, not be present for, not be thinking on your feet. You've got to be 100% going in there because the timing super matters, being awake super matters, and little errors can turn into big mistakes.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I really loved what you said about the setup. When I teach my sharps, and I really encourage the people who are self-piercing or piercing other others are not so sure about it, to video themselves, so they can go back and they can watch the session and they can see how it looked in reality to how it felt in their heads, and they can marry the two together, because often you have a vision of what it's looking like, and in reality it's totally different. And then you're able to improve just by being honest with yourself in the reflection of what you're seeing. So I think that's a great, I mean, we use it in sport quite a lot as well, that it just identifies parts of your body that you think are doing one job and they're actually doing another job.
Exactly. And I'm trying to think of the best way to word this here. Because I do know a little bit about sharps play and things like that. I do enjoy, but I'm not a blood player. So it makes it where you have to be a little bit more, I don't want to say cautious, because that sounds like you're not being as cautious when you are piercing the skin. I
can feel that, because in my beginning journey, I used to be deathly afraid of blood. Blood was something that I never connected with. I have to say, like, all you need is one good blood player and you're hooked for life. So, you just have to try it once and you'll be sold. So a lot of my work was done very cautiously and very, with keeping, blood play and, completely out of it. So I do understand what you're trying to say.
Yes. With fire, as you were saying, with like, you have to be very present and stuff like that, which is also true with sharp play and blood play and things like that. It does take quite a while to get your brain kind of honed to it. And I feel that's part of where fire reading has definitely assisted me, is because I know how it feels, and I always make sure, like, all of my toys and stuff like that, I make sure I know how it feels, so that when my bottom is feeling it, I can, if I know where their pain level is versus my pain level, I can attune a little bit better so that it's more precise for them.
Yeah, that means you got to know your medium quite well.
Absolutely.
I love the reminder, and I think that I started off as a mistress, but I'm turned into a sadomasochist. Like, for me, I play on both sides, and during my exploration of learning new kinks so that I could give an experience to somebody else, I was experiencing it, and then I fell in love with it, and I kept some of them as a bottom too. So, but I think that's so important, and I really don't think people can consent unless they actually have a full idea of what the experience contains, and that means they must know what it smells like, they must know what it feels like, they must know what it tastes like. And until you've done all of those things on yourself, I don't really feel that you can do that with somebody else. And it sounds very hypocritical because I'm a CBT dom and I don't have my own penis, but I have done all of the things that I do in CBT in some way on my own body. So I have an understanding of what the temperature does to the skin, what the needles do to the skin, what the impact does to the skin. I might not have my own testicles, but I certainly have experienced all of the tools that I'm using.
Exactly. And even though you can't necessarily explain or experience exactly what it is, you at least have a general idea. And it's a similar thing with fire, except it's a difference of different people have different types of skin. So if you have issues with eczema and rashes and things like that, you might not be able to handle as much as another person. On the flip side, somebody like me who is quite thick and callous skinned, I would be fine leaving it longer than even an average person because, like I say, I'm used to it. So it's not going to hurt me like it would hurt, somebody who's not used to it.
I have a question about skin there. So something like if you do wax play and you do it on an area that is in the sun a lot, we are very African. We spend a lot of time on the beach, so we are quite tanned. But if I do wax play on a tanned bit of my anatomy, there's very rarely any mark left or anything like that. If I take a piece of skin that barely sees the sun, and that hasn't been exposed too much, that skin reacts a lot quicker to the heat. Is it similar in fire play?
Absolutely. So, as I was saying before about the whole back thing, most people wear a shirt most of the time. So, of course, the majority of your back doesn't see a whole lot of sun. And things like the sun, I refer to as, because you can still get, first and second degree, which technically isn't a thing anymore because it's surface burns, deeper burns, and then nerve damage burns, I believe is what they're referred to now instead of first, second, and third degree. But the sun, just the sun itself, can still burn you quite badly. So you are developing a certain level of resistance to fire, not through direct contact with fire, but through just kind of the absorption of UV light.
Yeah, and exposure to the elements. So the skin that's less exposed is going to be more sensitive. Is there a difference in different color skin and how it reacts to heat?
I haven't noticed a whole lot, but I haven't done a lot of play with darker skinned people. So it's hard for me to say that for sure. But just on myself, for example, I'll use my arm as an example because, of course, the inside of my arm is far more pale than the outside of my arm. The outside of my arm, I will feel direct fire on, and I don't even notice it at first until I actually start smelling the hair on my arm burning.
I was going to say you'll hear the hair before you smell it.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, but then on the inside of my arm, it's more sensitive to the heat, so I'll notice the heat before I notice the smell.
Okay, that's what's super interesting is like the other tools that conduct heat. Like I've got a violet wand, and if you use the violet wand on the inside of my arm, it leaves like a suntan, like a rash, like a little red rash. If I use it on my legs or on the other side of my arm, it leaves nothing, or I can't see anything because my skin is more tanned there. So that's super interesting.
Yeah. Like I say, I haven't really done fire play with people with darker skin, so it's hard for me to make an absolute call on that. But that would, like, the inside and the outside of my arm is kind of probably my best way of explaining, one side of my arm, I don't really feel a whole lot. The other side of my arm, I feel a lot more.
Okay, cool. I like that, and that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely think there's other areas of the body that would be more sensitive. So if you were gonna do the genitals or something like that, that very rarely sees the elements of the natural world, that might be even more sensitive than the inside of your arm.
Yes. And when it comes to like genital areas and stuff like that, when it comes to any part of the body, really, you do have to be very aware of like how moist it is, because moisture will kind of absorb heat, because it's like, especially, that's the whole idea with sweat, is that it's supposed to cool you off because it's trying to absorb the heat off of your skin. So if you have moisture in that kind of an area, you kind of have to be very cautious and careful with that so that you're not increasing the amount of heat that might be in the area unbeknownst to you.
Oh, wow. That's a super good tip. So we need to make dry your veg before you light it stickers. As part of fire play.
I will.
My head is.
I will dovetail off that a little bit because one thing I also make sure is that people don't use like lotions and oils and stuff like that before I do fire play on them, because that can also insulate the fire, like the heat itself, and cause more sensitivity to it and even possibly cause burning.
So I really second that and echo your sentiment there, because when we do wax, we are quite adamant about having no lotions on the body before they come for their wax. It's super important that, especially when we're doing big pours, that we don't have something. And water-based lotions actually even worse, because that it sort of tends to turn to steam at some point. And they can cause really bad blisters. So I absolutely second that. And it can be super dangerous, and it happens without you realizing it. And the burn happens without you realizing it, because the heat is so gradual in the transition in the heat is so gradual. It's not like an instant burn where you'll feel it immediately, and you'll kind of be cooking from the inside with this lovely layer of lotion underneath your wax.
Yeah, it's exactly true. And I will show my age for a moment. Well, I suppose not so much my age, but my mom's age was, she grew up in a time where if you burnt yourself, instead of having like a burn gel or a lotion or anything like that, you were supposed to put butter on it.
Just about to say butter is the old wives' tale. And my granny also was like, you use butter, it's in the fridge, go and get it.
Yeah, and
mad woman.
And then, of course, they found out later that no, you were actually basically cooking yourself. So that was not a good idea.
Oh dear. I think at some point somebody told me to use toothpaste on a burn. That was the other thing that I was told as a kid.
I've never heard that, to be completely honest. What I've always heard is either ice or cold water, which also is not the best thing, because you're doing such a sudden temperature change, it can actually increase the blister that might form. So, and this is something I tell people when I working in the kitchen, when I see somebody burn themselves, because they naturally want to go to the cold water. I said, no, use room temperature water first and then slowly make it cold, because you're still technically burning even if you're away from the fire.
Yeah.
Your skin is still reacting to the burn. So if you use room temperature and then make it cold, it'll be A, more soothing, and B, it'll reduce the level of blister that you end up getting.
Wow, that's a super good tip. I'm going to remember that. I'm that person that wants to go and grab the ice out of the freezer. So you've just taught me something about burn management.
Well, thank you very much.
Also, if the the one thing I do know about the burn is if the burn is already open and is what they used to label a 3rd degree burn, it is not a good idea to run anything under it. You need to go and get medical help for that immediately.
Absolutely. So you can use, although I've heard this is a thing that I've never experienced, but I've overheard a couple people say that you can use a saline solution to try and clean it. That doesn't sound pleasant to me, so I've never done it. It's because, of course, saline is basically just salt, and salt in an open wound is not a pleasant feeling, although it definitely does help with cleaning it and everything like that. If it's that bad, I would rather have a medical professional take a look at it in my books.
I think having in my community having medical aid is super important. Our public hospitals are revolting and very unsafe. So like it's part of my life is medical aid, and I would use the medical aid because I pay for it and go to the hospital. And I also think in kink, and when you're playing with stuff like this, you need to decide what your plan is up front. If you're going to end up with a burn, what is the plan? Who's covering the costs? Where you're going to go? In my community, ending up at a government hospital can be life-threatening, and it can be a 5-day wait. So it's not a good solution to a problem. So you need to examine what the risks are and how you're going to mitigate them before you get to them. I think that's part of fire play and understanding what you're dealing with.
yeah, you kind of have to have steps. Like, so if the burn is this bad, then of course we know we can, like, if it's a first degree burn, we know, water, room temperature water to cold water, or even just a bucket of room temperature water for you to soak it in, if that is viable. Because of course, if it's on your back, that's not really the most accurate thing that's going to be able to happen unless you want to sit in the bathtub for a couple of hours. And then, of course, if it's a second degree burn, our plan needs to be this. If it's a third degree burn, our plan needs to be this. And that is,
100%.
yeah. And that, of course, does go with consent of, if you're consenting to have somebody put fire on you, you need to know that you are consenting to, this is what happens if this happens. This is what happens if that happens, that sort of thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this fire, the fire, like I said to you right in the beginning, it's really highlighted personal responsibility for me. Because who takes, these are things that need to be discussed beforehand, so that you've identified all the personal responsibility in the situation. I'm just quite aware of it after a couple of plays with fire, and after speaking to the fire community of how much personal responsibility comes into this game, because you have to be able to use your voice, and you have to start the conversation using your voice and speaking up, because it's no good after the fact.
100%. And like, one thing I would tell, because I've had a few friends that were vanilla before they met me or before talking to me about kink things, because I'm pretty open with my friends. Even a good chunk of my coworkers know that I'm involved with the kinky community. And so I get a lot of questions, and and people know I'm very open to answering questions. If you have a question, by all means, ask me. And so I'll get a lot of questions, and most of them are coming from bottoms. And I tell them, like, I'm going to be doing my first scene here, tomorrow or the next day or that kind of thing. What are some things that I do? And one of the first things I tell them is make sure all consent and everything has been done before playing. You don't want to do it during or after, because you do get emotional. Of course, endorphins are firing and stuff like that. So you might be a little more susceptible to saying yes to things that you wouldn't say yes to, when you're clear-headed, I suppose would be the best way of putting it.
Yeah, I think you get kink drunk.
Yes.
That's how I put it. And I think when you kink drunk, you're very happy and everything's great, and you give permission for anything. But there's a difference between permission and consent. And the consent for me means that you've really considered the risk. You have looked at your budget and decided what you can spend. And you can't spend on credit in kink. You have to spend what you have in your purse. So you need to be quite aware of what that is. So your boundaries have to be quite clear. And these are things that you need to do when you're not kink drunk.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that was a thing that happened recently here, where there was somebody who violated consent, and instead of just kind of, and they were somebody who was respected in the community, and I'm, again, not going to name names or anything like that, but they violated the consent because they tried to get consent during a scene. And instead of owning, like, yes, I made a mistake, I'm apologizing, they tried to justify it by the fact that they had a bunch of experience. And it's like, it doesn't matter if you have experience. As a matter of fact, it's kind of worse, because you should have known better.
And I think, I look, I'm a sharps player. I think half my kink is admin. I think secretly as I get older, like I'm becoming an admin kinkster, and I'm losing the touch for anything extreme and exciting. But so my negotiation starts 3 weeks before I play, and it starts on a Monday when people are thinking work and they're not thinking kink or kink drunk or anything but they're thinking adult brain, and that's
Mhm.
it's super important for me, because as a sharps player, I'm going to put 100 needles in you. Some of them are going to be quite big, so it's best that we have that you thought about this when you are thinking you've got to go to work and you've got a family and you have responsibilities and you have to adult, because you need to know that it's really what you want to do.
Absolutely.
Because this is meant to be fantasy. So, and fantasy becomes toxic when it impacts your ability to adult, in my experience.
100%. What for fire play, what I usually do if I know somebody is interested in doing fire play with me, I will start off by just doing like flogger and paddles and stuff like that. So I know how their body reacts to certain things, but also so that they know how I react when their body reacts to certain things. And
I love
then,
I love that, and I think that that's another topic that definitely needs to be spoken about. Impacts. We all have a different reaction to pain. We all have a different reaction to pleasure. It's actually one of my negotiation questions because of my experience. I giggle hysterically with pain. I love it, and I giggle hysterically. But that can be really intimidating for a big top who thinks that he's not hitting me hard enough, if he doesn't understand that that's how I'm showing my enthusiasm, and I'm not trying to goad him into hitting me harder, or I'm not trying to be a brat or an arsehole in the situation. And that's just how my body's reacting, and I enjoy the experience, and the giggles come with that. But if you don't know me, I look like I'm being frigging cheeky, and I'm not. So establishing how you react and how you show your enthusiasm and how you react to pain is super important.
absolutely. And different kinds of pain, even because like some people, when they're like just for impact play, when they're getting hit in one part of the body, they might moan. And then when they get hit with by another in another part of their body, they might recoil out of just instinct.
100%. Definitely agree with that. And I think that comes down to that personal responsibility and communication, and making sure there's an open line of communication. Like the first thing I learned in fire was communication really fucking matters,
Hmm.
because the idea of shouting fire is great. Yep, there is fire, but it doesn't help fuck all for the
Yeah.
spotters to yell fire. Yes, there's
Yeah.
fire. Where is the fire? Who is the fire on? What is burning? Can
Yeah.
we clarify this? Because by the time we've had that conversation, we've burnt the place down. So,
Yeah.
your communication's got to be super frigging clear.
Yeah. It's very much like if you're, I don't know what your emergency number is there, but for here it's 911. And if there is an emergency, people tell you, don't say somebody call 911. Look at somebody and point at them and say call 911. That way it's like there's it's an you're responsible for doing this, please do it kind of situation. Or an experience that I've had is that even if you're getting into a very slow impact with a car, and a lot of people's instinct is to say the name of the driver instead of just saying stop, because it's like you're saying my name, you obviously want my attention for something, but you're not expressing what the attention is supposed to be going towards.
100%. I think that's quite a good thing to add from a safety situation. That is, I like that. It appeals to my vanilla job. Actually, you've given me a good tip. Like, identify who is calling 911, because we've copied the American 911. We have that now. We used to have 10111, but because of all the American programs that flood our TV screens, every child learned 911 before they learned 10111. So our emergency number is now 911. Weird bit of South African history for everyone.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, you guys have flooded the market. You've really made sure that that's like a global thing. We've even picked up on it. But that's really important because we often are in situations where somebody can have a really bad fall and be quite badly injured. So having someone as an identified safety that can go and sort out the situation instead of exactly like you said. And when you said it, I could just picture the million situations I've been in where everybody stares at each other going, somebody call 911. Like
Yeah,
literally, like it happens. It's like I've been there.
yeah, exactly. And like I do make like when I'm doing my fire reading on stage, I will tell people there is going to be fire and there will be fire on me. So just so that you're aware, when it's a part of my act or if something horrible has happened, I do have a safe word. And that safe word is, oh, dear God, somebody call an ambulance. I'm on fire. Although it's much louder than that.
I was going to say, I don't think it's in that tone of voice.
And of course, like I say, it's a comedy act. So of course, everybody laughs at that. I let the laughter die. And I'm like, no, but seriously, if I'm on fire, somebody call an ambulance.
Has that ever happened?
It hasn't. The closest I ever got was one night I was at a bar and so when I was discussing things with you, I mentioned that I do fire body with and without clothes. And one of my fire eating tricks is I'll do a fire trail on my jeans and it wouldn't quite go out. So I had to be pretty vigorous in like putting it out. And it was just because I had a little too much fluid on the wand when I did it. But that's the closest I've ever gotten to. And that's the closest I hope to ever get to it.
I hope that's the closest you ever get to it. I think it goes wrong so fast. So I just pray for your sake that that's it. But
Yeah. But it's interesting because it was instinctual to. So when I put out my fire wands with my hands, I wrap my hand around it, and it was the one wand I had in my right hand, and it was on my left side. I instinctually let the wand slide right into my hand, so my hand wrapped right around the fire, so I could put the wand down without, of course, lighting anything else on fire because the wand was now out, and I could use my other hand to help get the fire out. So it's interesting once you do it for a while, you kind of develop almost a sixth sense of, okay, fire needs to go out. Okay, it's out. Now I can use the hand that was controlling the fire to help put out the fire that needs to be put out.
yeah, and I think in order to get that, you need to make it an automatic response. So you need to start with a good procedure.
Yeah.
I have a little like saying that one of the other tops has taught me about how in lighting the wand so that it never ends up that I have a handful of alcohol and I always have a clean hand. And that's already become like a standard procedure and it's becoming automatic. Like it's not something I even have to think about anymore. But in the beginning, I had to be quite careful about having a little statement that I went through, a little saying that I went through, so that I just made sure that I was 100% okay. And now I don't even need to say the things. My body almost does it automatically. So I do think it does come with time.
Absolutely. Like when you're doing fire eating, Brian Brushwood pointed out that when you put the fire in your mouth and you wrap your mouth around it, of course, instinctually you're realizing there's fire in my mouth. That should not be in my mouth. I should pull it out. And you kind of have to fight that instinct to a certain extent, but you want to do a 4 count, like 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi. It should be out by 2. But you want to give it that extra 2 seconds just to make sure that it is out. And at this point, I don't even have to count because I know just by the feel and how much time has passed with it being in my mouth, okay, it's out now. I know it's out. So there is you start learning things and then you almost, it's not that you stop learning things, but the things that you have learned now become an instinct.
Yeah, they become automatic. You don't have to repeat. You don't have to. It's not like brand new. It's funny how some kinks though, like a rope knot is something that I still can't do. I have been to a million rope lessons. I have some of the country's best riggers that work with me when I do photo shoots and stuff. And they're frigging fantastic. They've tried to teach me. I've paid a fair amount of my salary towards rope lessons, and I have to relearn how to tie a single column knot every time I pick up a piece of rope. So some things just don't become automatic, and then you need a very good rhyme to go with them. Thankfully, fires already, like after a month of doing this, is becoming slightly easier. Like it's definitely something that is, but anything that is a skill takes practice. And the other thing is, if you haven't been practicing and you pick it up again, it's important that you know that you've got your rhyme or got your process or whatever works for you. You don't have to sing nursery rhymes like Miss Kitten does, but it works for me. But it's important that you've had that practice before you put the bottom in the situation, and you just don't take anything for granted.
Oh, absolutely. And that actually, as I was saying with the whole impact, like I'll always do an impact scene first, just so that I know how they react, they know how I react and everything like that. I'll usually do, before I even start the negotiation of like where the fire is going to touch you, that kind of thing, I'll do kind of a quick little, 10-minute demo on myself of like, this is the type of stuff that I can do, and this is what I can do to myself. I'm not going to necessarily do this all to you, but this is the kind of stuff I'm comfortable with. Now we start the conversation. What are you comfortable with?
Yeah.
And I also highlight to people like this, you're new to this. If this is your first time, don't be sad. Don't be ashamed. Don't be fearful of like, I'm only comfortable with maybe one or two things. That's okay. That can open up other things, or it can at least be a sample to be like, no, this isn't for me. Whichever way you want to go on, that the kink part of your brain decides to travel down, that's absolutely fine. Just because somebody has a bunch of experience and they want to play with you and give you a little bit of experience doesn't mean you have to be open to everything they want to do.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that fire and showed me in the beginning is it's an incredible force. My brain went into shutdown a little bit the first couple of times I played with it. I almost was in awe of what was happening. I wasn't really able to make my own decisions. So having a slow experience where you can go home, you can think about it, decide that it's really what you want to do, would be important. Because if I'd rushed it in the beginning, I know that my logical brain would have said yes to everything, but my emotional side hadn't caught up yet, and it took me a little bit of time to download the experience. There's a lot going on, and my brain is reacting still with a fear response or a trauma response because it's fucking fire. I mean, I shouldn't be in the situation that I'm in.
Exactly. Yeah.
So baby steps. It's not the Olympics. You've got nothing to win in this. You will need to look after yourself too.
Yeah, and like I've said to couple people that I played with, if you don't want it to touch your naked body, that's fine. We can do it in clothes, but everything has to be 100% cotton, because if it's like a polyester blend or anything, polyester melts. So you don't want that getting stuck to your skin. So you definitely want to make sure everything's 100% cotton. You don't want any designs on your shirts or anything like that, because you don't know what the shirt itself might be 100% cotton, but the design might be some sort of, a paint or a polyester that might insulate the heat or increase the heat or anything like that. That's why I was talking about when I was doing the fire trail on my leg, I always make sure I'm wearing jeans on my pants, and that's safety. That's almost exclusively safety to make sure I'm wearing jeans, because, again, the cotton, and especially with jeans, because it's a thick cotton, I could light my, I can do that fire trail and my leg won't even feel the heat for almost a full 10 seconds of it burning.
Yeah, we play with fire whips, and we always we're always in jeans and the sick pants because we wrap those whips around ourselves a good couple of times. It's
Oh,
inevitable.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, that is a combination of the unpredictability of fire and the unpredictability of a whip in and of itself, is that you're aiming at a certain spot and you may be perfect, but when you pull that back, you don't have 100% control of where it's going to end up at the end of that.
Yeah, and I like what you said about the warm up as well, because I think the one thing with the whip as well is that there is an extensive warm up before we light it. We're making sure that it's working. We're making sure that we're handling it well. We're making sure that our bodies are warmed up, that we know how to use it. So we're playing with it for 20 minutes, half an hour before even setting it on fire.
Absolutely. And of course, as you like with me on stage, I can go, because I've done it so many times at this point, I can go right into my act at a moment's notice. And because I know all the beats, again, it's rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. When you're playing with somebody, it's a huge difference, because even though you might have played with other people, you might not have played with this person. And on top of that, there could be a multitude of different reasons why they might react to something slightly different than they usually do. And you have to kind of be aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so excited to see your fire eating. I'm dying to see it now. The only thing that's stuck in my head from this conversation is, what does fire feel like on my tongue? Know that I'm going to be asking myself that question for the next 3 months, and I'm going to have to at some point find out what the answer is.
Well, if you want to know something, so I work, and this is partly because I do have ADD and a multitude of other things, but I like to try to add things into my act, and I've kind of made a cushion to my act where I do a lot of things with matches before. Well, not a lot of things, but a couple things with matches beforehand. And the thing that I'm working on right now to include into that is I'm working on learning how to light a match off of striking it off of my tooth.
Oh, wow, that is so fun. How is that going?
It's still kind of hit and miss, because you're looking at a very small surface area where usually a match is you want to light it off of a larger surface area. So admittedly, it's still a little hit and miss. But the first key to it is getting strike anywhere matches. Because if you're just using regular sulfur burning matches, those won't light. Those won't light on anything except for the surface that they're designed to light on. But strike anywhere matches are kind of hard to come by, so you kind of have to special order them. So I ordered a bunch of them, and I'll go through an entire pack of them trying to practice. Usually it takes me about 2 days to go through an entire pack if I'm practicing a lot through the course of 2 days. And it still takes me about 5 strikes or more to light the match off of my tooth. But it does really feel like it still feels like a big accomplishment when I finally get that one to light. And it's like,
Dude,
yes, I did it.
I have this ridiculous grin on my face. I have to see this. This is one thing you have to show me. You have to put this in the Rain of Fire act. I'm going to make you do it. I have to see that. That's fantastic. It is so unique.
Well, if you promise me you'll edit the 5 or so times that I'll do beforehand before it actually lights, I will happily put that in there.
100%. I guarantee that. I'm in it to win it. I have to see this. That's fantastic. My cheeks hurting from smiling thinking about it.
Yeah. If you like, after we're done our recording and stuff like that, I can even show you a couple of the 2 match tricks that I do in my act, just to kind of give you a little bit of a sampler of kind of the stuff that I do.
Amazing. I will, I'm going to say goodbye to my listeners so that I can go and watch Ginger Wolf do amazing things with matches. And we're really excited to have you for Rain of Fire. And thank you for chatting to me tonight. I've had a lovely time getting to know you and hearing a bit about your journey and how you got involved and how much care and how important fire is to you in your life. It's been quite special. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And it was absolutely lovely chatting with you. And to your lovely listeners, I will also say, if you're curious about seeing the fire tricks, the match tricks, I will definitely include them when we do the showcase.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And to all my listeners, we have a couple more days actually of our early bird sale because we've been a bit slow with releasing our schedule. We've extended our early bird sale, so there's still a great discount on tickets. If you don't have a ticket, what are you doing with your life? Get a ticket, do this thing. It's going to be amazing. We have some incredible demos, some incredible artists, and some incredible educators coming to teach you all about fire. So we are super looking forward to having you guys and to putting this thing together. And keep following us, keep loving our presenters, keep loving our educators, and keep loving our podcasts. And from my dungeon in Cape Town to yours, wherever you are, lots of love and kitten kisses.